Hey, welcome back for this week's Trick Tip Tuesday. And for today's tip, I'm going to show you guys how to hammer a flange over on the edge of a piece of sheet metal with as minimal distortion as possible. So anytime you're bending a flange over, typically you're stretching the edge that you're bending just as a result of the action of starting usually at one end and working towards another, whether it's in a bead roller or maybe even a power hammer or something like that. You're typically still starting, you start at that one edge, and as you start tipping one edge this way, there's a little bit of stretch that's going on in your flange in order to, get it all to move slowly, down where you need it. So I'm going to show you how to do that with a hammer. I've got a old Pexto stake here that I'm going to be using to hammer on to show you guys kind of a process that I use when I want to, use the hammer to tip an edge over. Maybe you don't have access to a bead roller or another machine and you want to put an edge on something. You can still do it with as basic of a tool as a body hammer and even a dolly. I've done it on a dolly clamped in a vise or, something like that, or these Pexto stakes work great for that. So I'm going to show you how to do that with as minimal distortion as possible, and then show you what would happen if you maybe were a little too aggressive and how much different the flange and the panel would look once you're done. So, okay, so you can see here I've got two panels. They're identical that have, I've got a line marked on both ones so I can see kind of about where I want my flange. And so from there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to bend this flange over, we'll just say as quickly as possible, to show you guys how the panel reacts. So if the panel's flat this way, we'll show you how the panel is in this direction after that flange is hammered over. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. So first things first, gloves, safety glasses, be safe while you're hammering and dollying. So for starters, I'm just going to grab a flat body hammer, which I say flat, but they all have maybe about a 36-inch radius curve on them, just to keep yourself from hitting the edges as you're hammering. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. What I'm going to do on this Pexto stake is just line up my line with the edge of the Pexto stake, and then I'm just going to work my way down. So sometimes if you get a hair off, you can still massage it one way or another, and that's part of the beauty of doing something by hand, is that you can work it where you need it, and you can hammer it back and forth, as long as you're staying in line. So let's just say you want to do this as fast as possible. So obviously with that, the harder you hit, the more action you're going to get out of the panel, which, if you hit this really hard right here and this bends over, well, it's got to pull that extra metal from somewhere in this lip. So essentially what's going to happen is it's going to end up stretching this edge more, and I'll show you what that does, and then we'll go to the next panel and show you how to do it with minimal stretching and distortion in the panel. So go ahead and start here. So you can see I got the flange tipped over pretty much 90 degrees. So what I'm going to do is just place it on this side and actually hammer on the flange side to try to smooth it back out. It's got a little bit of rough kind of bumpiness to it. So all right, so there's that flange. So you can see, when you're doing it like this, aside from kind of going back and forth on both sides, it's hard to get a super, super crisp edge. You're always going to have more of a roll action in the new flange that you've tipped. So, but as you can see, I was trying to bend that pretty hard over, and you can see how rough the edge of this panel is. It's got some marking in there, and it's you know, it's fairly flat now because I hammered it this way, but you know, it's got some roughness to it. Well, hopefully you can see it on the camera there. There's a decent amount of little curve in the panel here. So it's actually because of the hammering to bend this down and then also to smooth it out, it's got a nice little curve to the panel because it's now stretched this flange out. So this could easily be taken care of in a shrinker stretcher, which we showed off in last week's Trick Tip Tuesday. But yeah, so that would be if you're trying to work it pretty quickly. So to bend this flange over to where this stays more true and flat, and maybe not as rough on the edge, in order to work that over, we'll start on the new panel, but we're going to be hammering a little softly, maybe even potentially kind of starting it with a more of a dead blow hammer or a rubber mouth. So we'll go ahead and start this a little bit, and we'll kind of slowly work the flange over the whole direction back and forth. So all right, so I've got that flange tipped on here, and it's as you can see, matching between the two panels. But the difference is, and you can see it here, is that the panel on the right here where you know, I hammered a little harder with the body hammer, it's got a little bow to it, and you can hopefully see the air gap in between those two. So this stayed really nice and flat, you know, in this direction, whereas this panel here has a little curve to it. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of tip on maybe some patience. Sometimes, you know, with metal shaping, it's real easy to, you know, want to go too fast, want to just make it happen right away. And, you know, it really does help to have a little bit of patience when you're doing stuff like this, because, you know, just a little, you know, a little difference in a panel like that, where you have one where you bend a flange and that panel stays really nice and flat, versus having a little bit of curve to it based on, you know, just maybe how hard or how quickly you're trying to work the metal. You know, anytime you bend metal, you're stretching it. And, you know, so maybe the smoother, the more even, and the slower you bend something like that, you know, the more uniform and true you can keep that panel. Whereas if you go fast and quick, you know, you kind of beat it up, you end up stretching it a little too much, and you end up causing yourself just a little more work, you know, in a part. So, yeah, hopefully this kind of gives you a little tip on, you know, hammering a flange over, and maybe how to really help that edge stay nice and straight. So thanks for watching this week's Trick Tip Tuesday, and we'll see you next week.